Billionaire dad watches waitress feed his disabled son. His reaction shocks her. She thought it was just another cold, rainy night at the diner, until she saw a little boy alone in a wheelchair, shivering on the sidewalk, waiting for someone who never came. She brought him inside, gave him warm soup, and treated him like he mattered. She didn't know he was the son of a billionaire, and she definitely didn't know the man watching from across the street would change her life forever. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now let's get back to the story. The boy was trembling, soaked to the bone, his tiny fingers clutching the edges of his thin jacket like it could protect him from the biting wind. His wheelchair sat unevenly on the cracked sidewalk, puddles gathering beneath the wheels. He didn't cry, he just waited. Still, silent, like he'd done this before. Like being forgotten was something he was used to. Inside the small diner across the street, Naomi Brooks was wiping down the last table of her double shift, humming softly to distract herself from the ache in her feet. It was nearly midnight. Rain pounded the windows, and the fluorescent lights above flickered with exhaustion, mirroring her own. That's when she saw him, out there in the cold, completely alone. Without a second thought, Naomi grabbed an umbrella and ran outside, the wind almost ripping it from her hands. She knelt beside the boy, her voice warm despite the weather. "Hey, sweetheart, where's your coat?" The boy looked up at her, dark curls matted to his forehead, lips trembling. I was waiting for my dad. He said 5 minutes. He glanced at the street like he still believed that promise. Naomi didn't ask how long he'd been there. She could see it in his eyes, long enough. "Come on, let's get you warm," she said. She pushed his wheelchair inside, ignoring the trail of rainwater they left behind. The diner was nearly empty except for the cook in the back and a man passed out in a booth. Naomi wrapped a towel around the boy's shoulders and set a bowl of tomato soup in front of him, her hands moving with practiced care. He introduced himself as Lucas, 9 years old, loved astronomy and comic books, had been in a wheelchair since the age of 5 after a car accident that he didn't remember, but that his body never let him forget. His mother had died in that crash. Naomi listened like his story mattered, because it did. She didn't pity him. She saw him. Across the street, hidden behind tinted glass in a black Mercedes, a man sat watching. His jaw was tight. His hands gripped the steering wheel like it might slip away. Gabriel Hart had never been late before. His world didn't allow for lateness, or weakness, or public emotion. But tonight, everything had gone wrong. A boardroom meltdown, a PR crisis, a call he couldn't ignore. And now, there was his son, being cared for by a stranger. But it wasn't the soup that hit him in the gut. It wasn't even the warmth she wrapped around Lucas like it was second nature. It was the way she looked at him, like he was whole, like he wasn't just a burden in a chair or the son of a billionaire. Gabriel had hired full-time nannies, therapists, private teachers, yet none had looked at Lucas like that. And she didn't even know who he was. Naomi poured Lucas a glass of lemonade, her smile soft but real. "Next time, you tell your dad to come wait inside with you. No one's too important to be on time for someone they love." Lucas giggled. "He's not mean, just busy." Naomi ruffled his hair gently. "Everyone's busy, baby, but not everyone's kind, and kindness is what matters." Gabriel stepped out of the car slowly, rain still falling, as if the sky hadn't noticed the moment shift. He walked across the street, coat collar high, heart low. The bell above the diner door rang as he entered, and Naomi turned, instantly reading who he was from the boy's brightened face. "Dad?" Lucas called. Gabriel crossed the room in quick strides and dropped to one knee beside his son. "I'm sorry," he said, quiet, honest. Naomi stood silently, not wanting to intrude, but not stepping away either. Something in Gabriel's expression told her this wasn't the man people wrote about in business columns. This was a man who didn't know how to show up, but was trying to learn. Gabriel turned to her. "You took care of him?" She nodded. "He was freezing. I couldn't just leave him there. Most people would have kept walking." "I'm not most people." He looked at her longer now. Not just as a waitress in a small-town diner, but as someone who'd done something extraordinary without thinking it was anything special. "I'm Gabriel Hart," he said, extending a hand. She hesitated before shaking it. "Naomi Brooks." "Naomi," he repeated like he was testing the sound. "Thank you." Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. "He's a great kid. I didn't do anything anyone shouldn't do." He glanced at the table, at the empty bowl, the wet towel. "Still, thank you." Lucas leaned against his father's arm, already fighting sleep. Naomi bent down. "He can rest here if you're not ready to go." Gabriel shook his head. "No, we've kept you long enough. I'll take him home." Before he left, he pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table toward Naomi. "If you ever want to do something else, something more, call me." She looked at the card without picking it up. "I don't need a favor." "This isn't a favor. It's an invitation." And with that, he left, pushing his son's wheelchair through the quiet storm. Naomi stared at the door long after it closed, the gold letters of Heart and Veil Corporation shimmering on the card under the diner lights. She didn't know it yet, but that night, soaked in rain, wrapped in kindness, had just redrawn the lines of her life. And far across the city, in a penthouse lined with glass and power, Gabriel Hart lay awake beside his sleeping son, replaying Naomi's words again and again. Kindness is what matters. And for the first time in years, he wondered if he'd been living all wrong. The business card sat untouched on Naomi's nightstand for 2 days. She'd glanced at it a dozen times, always with the same mix of curiosity and resistance. Heart and Veil Corporation. It felt too big, too far from her world of coffee pots and cracked vinyl booths, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lucas, smiling through a spoonful of soup, laughing about Saturn's rings, and she remembered Gabriel's face when he watched them, not cold, not arrogant, just lost. On the third morning, her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. "Naomi Brooks?" The voice was polished, precise. "This is Eleanor from Mr. Hart's office. He'd like to invite you for lunch, today if possible." She almost said no. Almost, but something in her gut, the same part of her that ran into the rain for a boy she didn't know, whispered, "Go." 2 hours later, Naomi stood in front of a skyscraper that seemed to touch the clouds. She looked up, the way someone might stare at a mountain they never planned to climb. But she squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The elevator ride to the 58th floor was silent, clean, cold. And when the doors opened, it was like entering a different universe. Glass walls, leather chairs, people in suits who looked like they hadn't smiled in weeks. Gabriel was waiting for her by a window with a view that stretched across the city. "You came," he said simply. "I said I would," she replied, even though she hadn't. Even though he led her to a private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows. The table was already set, the food too fancy for names she recognized. But she sat, polite and poised, even as her heart thumped a little louder than usual. "I wanted to thank you again," Gabriel began, his tone softer than she expected. "Not just for that night, for seeing my son?" Naomi tilted her head. "I didn't do anything special. Just what anyone with a heart would do." Gabriel looked down, as if that truth hurt more than it should. "Then maybe I've met too many people without one." A pause. Then he pushed a folder across the table. "I'm offering you a position. Special Consultant, Community Development Initiatives. It's a new division I'm building, and I need someone like you." Naomi blinked. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you're brave, honest. You speak from the gut. You made my son feel safe, and I don't think that's something you can teach." She stared at the folder. The salary printed on the paper was more than she'd made in 2 years at the diner. "You want me to come work in this world?" she said slowly. "A black waitress from South End. In this glass tower? I want you to change it," he said, from the inside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what he was offering, and what she'd have to carry, filled the silence. "Do I have to say yes now?" she asked. Gabriel smiled, and it was the first time it reached his eyes. "No, but I hope you do." That night, Naomi stood on her fire escape, the stars blurred by city light. Her fingers ran over the edges of the contract, her thoughts louder than the traffic below. She didn't need a handout. She didn't trust pretty words from powerful men, but she did believe in chances, and what you do when one finally knocks. The next morning, Naomi walked back into the skyscraper, not as a guest, but as a storm no one had expected. Her first week at Heart and Vale was a crash course in silent judgment. People looked past her, spoke over her. One executive even mistook her for the cleaning staff. But Naomi didn't flinch. She wore her curls loose and her voice firm. She brought ideas, challenged meetings, asked questions no one had dared to. And soon people started to notice, not because of how she looked, but because of what she saw. Gabriel watched it all from behind glass walls. Something about her presence unsettled him. Not in a bad way, more like the ground shifting beneath his feet, exposing roots he didn't know existed. They started having lunch together, first in his office, then in nearby cafes. The conversations wandered, from Lucas's therapies to Naomi's childhood, from race and legacy to music and regret. He asked questions he'd never asked before. She gave answers that made him think, and think deeply. One afternoon, Naomi brought Lucas by the office. He wheeled in confidently, giving fist bumps to the interns and asking Gabriel's assistant if Jupiter could ever explode. Gabriel smiled as he watched Naomi kneel to adjust Lucas's seatbelt. She wasn't performing, she wasn't pretending. She just was fully, fiercely, beautifully herself. That night, Gabriel couldn't sleep. He found himself replaying the way she laughed when Lucas told a joke, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about justice, the way she called out a senior partner in a meeting without blinking. She was rewriting the rules, not just of his company, but of his life. He didn't know it yet, but he was falling, hard and fast. The next day, as Naomi walked into his office, carrying a folder full of ideas and her usual calm confidence, Gabriel looked at her like she was a mirror he'd been afraid to face. But before he could say anything, his phone buzzed. His lawyer. And the news made the room spin. "Gabriel," Naomi asked, noticing his change in posture, "everything okay?" He looked up slowly. "My ex-wife. She's petitioning for full custody of Lucas." Naomi froze. And just like that, the room wasn't full of numbers and charts anymore. It was full of fear. Gabriel had faced courtrooms, hostile takeovers, and billion-dollar negotiations. But nothing ever made his chest tighten como agora. As Naomi sent the interns out of the room and closed the office door behind her, he still hadn't moved. "She wants custody?" Naomi asked, slowly walking over. He nodded. "Full custody. Says I've created an unstable environment. That Lucas isn't receiving the care he needs." Naomi didn't answer right away. She sat across from him, eyes searching his face. "Is she wrong?" she asked softly. His jaw tensed. "I've done everything I can. Therapists, teachers, private nurses. But none of that ever felt like enough. And now, she's using that against me." Naomi leaned forward, her voice firm. "You love that boy, Gabriel. Anyone can see that, including the judge. But you can't fight her the way you fight corporate battles. This is different." Gabriel rubbed his face with both hands. "She's ruthless. Always has been. She never wanted Lucas after the accident. Said he made her feel trapped." Naomi swallowed hard. "And now?" "She got remarried. Clean image. 2 kids. Picture-perfect family. She wants to prove she's the better parent." Naomi felt something inside her shift. Protective. Fierce. Lucas deserves better than a courtroom war. He deserves peace. I know, Gabriel said, his voice cracking for the first time. There was silence, heavy, honest, and then he looked at her, really looked, and said something he hadn't meant to say aloud. I don't want to do this without you. Naomi's breath caught. For a second, the air between them changed, sharpened, softened. But before either could name it, the intercom buzzed. Mr. Hart, your legal team is here. He stood, straightened his suit, put the mask back on. Naomi watched him go, wondering what scared her more. The custody battle, or the fact that part of her wanted to stand beside him through it. Later that week, the company hosted a gala at the City Museum, a glittering display of wealth, power, and perfectly curated smiles. Naomi had tried to get out of going, but Eleanor insisted. Gabriel personally requested your presence, she said. So Naomi stood in front of her mirror, smoothing the fabric of a deep green dress she'd borrowed from her cousin. Her curls were pinned up, her makeup light but elegant. She looked like someone she almost didn't recognize, someone who belonged. At the gala, people turned when she walked in, some curious, some judgmental, others confused. But Gabriel saw her before anyone else. He moved through the crowd, tie slightly loosened, eyes fixed only on her. You're here, he said, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. You asked, she replied, tilting her head. I'm glad I did. They danced, slow, close, with the kind of tension that only two people trying not to fall can create. Naomi leaned in. You're scared. Gabriel didn't pretend otherwise. Yeah. Then let me help. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not a promise, not yet, but a quiet surrender. A recognition. But not everyone watching was smiling. At the far end of the room stood Veronica Hart, Gabriel's ex-wife, flawless in diamonds and confidence, arms crossed, gaze sharp. She was watching Naomi, measuring her, and planning her next move. The following week was chaos. Gabriel's custody hearing was fast-tracked. Veronica's lawyers painted him as unstable, overworked, emotionally absent, more focused on his empire than his son. Naomi spent every spare second helping him prepare. She collected letters from Lucas's teachers, therapists, even a few employees who'd seen Gabriel leave meetings to attend doctor visits. But the most powerful testimony came from Lucas himself. The court allowed him a private session with the judge. He was nervous, but Naomi had practiced with him for days. I just want to stay with my dad, he said quietly. He never makes me feel broken. Naomi cried when she heard what he'd said. So did Gabriel. On the day of the final hearing, Gabriel wore the same watch he'd worn the night of the accident, a reminder maybe of everything he'd survived. Naomi sat just behind him, heart in her throat, fingers gripping the edge of the bench. The judge read through the arguments, slowly, carefully. Then she looked at both parties. In light of all evidence, custody will remain with Mr. Hart, with shared visitation rights. Gabriel exhaled. Naomi closed her eyes. Lucas, waiting outside the courtroom, jumped into his father's arms the moment he saw him. Did we win? Gabriel nodded, voice trembling. We did. That night as the city slept, Gabriel showed up at Naomi's apartment. No driver, no suit, just jeans, a hoodie, and eyes filled with everything he hadn't yet said. You kept me grounded, he whispered. You kept him safe. Naomi opened the door wider. Come in, she said, voice steady, but only if you're coming in for real. He stepped inside. The rain started again, soft, steady, like the beginning of something, or the end of being alone. The quiet in Naomi's apartment wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the air before a storm. Gabriel stood just inside the door, soaked from the rain, eyes locked on her like she was the only steady thing in his world. Why did you come? Naomi asked, not moving. He looked around her small living room. The worn-out couch, the shelf full of library books, The framed photo of a woman who must have been Naomi's mother. "Because I couldn't sleep until I saw you," he admitted. Naomi crossed her arms, her voice low. "You don't owe me anything, Gabriel." "I know." He stepped closer. "But that's the thing. I want to be here." She didn't speak, not right away, because she was used to people showing up broken, only to leave when they felt whole again. She wasn't going to be someone's emotional stopover. "Do you even know what this is?" she asked, not with anger, but with truth. "I don't," he said honestly. "But when I see you, I remember who I want to be." That stopped her, because it wasn't a line, it was real. She motioned toward the couch. "Sit down before you pass out." He chuckled and dropped into the cushions like a man finally laying down a weight. She handed him a towel and poured them both some tea. They talked, for hours, about their childhoods, about failure, about how loneliness wasn't always being alone. Sometimes it was being surrounded by people who didn't really see you. Naomi learned that Gabriel had grown up poor, that the billionaire part came later, and came with scars. Gabriel learned that Naomi had put herself through college while working nights, that her little brother died from a gunshot meant for someone else, and that she had stopped believing in the system long before it stopped believing in her. At some point, Gabriel leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You make me want to slow down." And when his lips touched hers, it wasn't rushed. It was tender, unsure, like two people discovering a new language. They didn't sleep together that night. Naomi pulled away gently and said, "Not yet." And Gabriel nodded. No frustration, no pressure. "Then I'll wait." She smiled. "That's new for you, isn't it?" "Very." The next few weeks blurred like a dream Naomi didn't want to wake from. They still worked together, formally, professionally. But something unspoken had changed. Her name on his lips held warmth now. His gaze lingered longer. People noticed, and whispers began. And not all of them were kind. "She's ambitious," someone muttered in an elevator. "Playing the long game," another scoffed during a boardroom coffee break. Naomi heard them, every word, every implication. It didn't break her, but it chipped away at something, a doubt, a fear. One afternoon, Gabriel found her in the office garden, sitting alone. "They're talking," she said before he could speak. "Let them," he said. "That's easy for you to say." He stepped closer, reading the tension in her shoulders. "I know what this looks like, Naomi, but I don't care what they think. I care about you." She looked up, eyes brimming. "I've worked my whole life not to be seen as someone who slept her way to a seat at the table. I don't want to be the exception to the rule. I want to change the rule." Gabriel didn't argue. He just nodded. "Then let's change it together." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "If we're going to do this, we do it on my terms. No hiding, but no favors either. I want everything I earn to be mine." "You already have," he whispered. That night, Gabriel invited her to dinner at his home. Not as a guest, but as part of his world. Lucas ran to greet her at the door, throwing his arms around her waist. "You're coming to dinner?" He grinned. "I wouldn't miss it," she smiled. They played board games, ate homemade pasta Gabriel had tried and failed to cook, and laughed until Lucas fell asleep on the couch. Naomi carried him to bed, tucking the covers around him like she'd done it 1,000 times. Gabriel watched from the hallway, a look in his eyes that held something deeper than admiration. "You're not just changing my life," he said. "You're changing his." Naomi turned to him, touched his cheek. "And you're changing mine." But just as the warmth began to feel permanent, the next morning delivered a storm. The headlines hit like a punch to the chest. Billionaire heart romantically linked to new hire, ethics in question. Sleeping her way to the top? Naomi Brooks, social justice or social climber. Naomi's phone blew up. Her inbox flooded. Old friends sent concerned texts. Some even sent accusations. Inside the company, tensions rose. Meetings got quieter when she walked in. People stopped making eye contact. Gabriel called an emergency press meeting. "This company does not tolerate racism, sexism, or the weaponization of personal narratives to shame women for their relationships," he said clearly. He refused to let them tear Naomi down, but Naomi didn't attend the conference. She sat at home staring at the wall, wondering if it was all worth it. Later that night, Gabriel came over. "I can fix this," he said. "No," Naomi whispered. "We fix this." She stood up, picked up her laptop, and typed a long, raw post. She told the truth. Not the tabloid version, the one about a rainy night, a boy in a wheelchair, a woman who chose kindness without knowing who was watching. And it went viral. The world listened. Some changed their minds. Most importantly, Lucas saw it too. "You're brave," he told her the next day, and Naomi smiled. "Maybe, but not because I fought them, because I didn't fight myself." Still, even as the storm calmed, one thing lingered. Gabriel knew he loved her, but he hadn't said it yet. And Naomi. She wasn't sure if he could. For days, Naomi waited for Gabriel to say something. Not in press statements, not in public gestures, but in words that mattered. He did everything right on the outside, held her hand in meetings, defended her in interviews, even brought her lunch during her longest shifts. But what she needed was the one thing he kept avoiding. "I love you." She never demanded it. She never begged. But every time she looked at him, really looked, she knew he felt it, knew he wanted to say it, but something in him always pulled back at the edge. And that silence started to grow loud. It echoed in the spaces between their conversations, in the pause before a kiss, in the way he smiled but never let it reach the place where truth lived. One night, after a community event she had organized, a celebration of small businesswomen and underrepresented voices, they sat together in his car, parked outside her apartment. The city lights were blurred by a fine mist of rain. Naomi stared out the window. "Tonight meant something." Gabriel nodded. "You made it mean something." She turned to face him. "Did I? Or did I just dress it up long enough to make people comfortable?" "Naomi." "I'm tired, Gabriel. Not of the fight, of the pretending, of showing up in your world and always wondering if I'm temporary." He reached for her hand. "You're not." "Then say it." He froze. She wasn't angry, just tired of chasing ghosts. "Do you love me?" The silence was unbearable. Finally, Gabriel's voice broke the air, low, hoarse. "I don't know if I can. Not because I don't feel it. I do. God, I do. But every time I've let someone in, they've left. Or I've lost them. My mom, my wife, even Lucas. I almost lost him." His voice cracked. "Saying it feels like cursing it." Naomi pulled her hand away. "Love isn't a curse, Gabriel. It's the only thing that's ever saved me." She opened the car door, stepped out into the drizzle, and didn't look back. Gabriel didn't chase her, and that was the worst part. For the next week, Naomi kept her distance. She showed up at work, handled her meetings, led her teams, but the light in her voice had dimmed. Even Lucas noticed. "You and Dad aren't laughing like you used to," he said one night over video call. Naomi smiled sadly. "Sometimes grown-ups get confused." Lucas tilted his head. "Did he do something bad?" "No," she whispered. "He did something scared." That night Naomi found herself walking through the neighborhood where she'd grown up. Cracked sidewalks, old murals faded by sun and time. It used to be dangerous. It still wasn't safe, but it was hers. A place where truth had always lived out loud, even when it hurt. She thought about her mother, a woman who worked 2 jobs and still made time to hug her every morning before school. Her mom had loved loudly and taught Naomi to do the same. And now here she was, loving a man who whispered when she needed him to shout. Meanwhile, Gabriel was unraveling. He'd built empires out of logic, controlled everything he could, but no amount of control could fill the hollow space Naomi had left. He stared at the empty side of his bed, walked past the coffee shop they used to stop at, saw her smile in his son's drawings. It was like her fingerprints were still everywhere, except where it mattered. One morning, Lucas sat down across from him at breakfast. "You should say it," the boy said. Gabriel looked up. "Say what?" Lucas shrugged. "Whatever it is that's stuck in your throat. You always tell me to speak my mind. Maybe you should too." Sometimes, the most brutal wisdom comes from 9-year-olds. That afternoon, Gabriel left the office early. He didn't call, didn't send a driver. He took the subway, alone, to South End. When Naomi opened the door to her apartment, she wasn't surprised to see him. Just tired. "I don't have anything left to prove, Gabriel." "I know," he said, "but I do." He stepped inside and handed her a folded piece of paper. She opened it slowly. It was a letter, handwritten. His handwriting. Crooked. Raw. "Naomi, I don't know when I learned to be afraid of loving people. Maybe it was the night my mom left. Or when my wife told me Lucas would ruin her life. Maybe it's always been there, passed down like bad genes. But I know when I stopped being afraid of you, it was the night you carried my son inside and gave him soup like he was the most important soul on earth. You didn't know who he was. You didn't know who I was. You just loved him. And I've been trying to deserve that ever since. I love you, Naomi. I'm sorry I took so long to say it, but I'm saying it now, and I'll keep saying it every damn day if you let me." Naomi felt the tears before they reached her cheeks. Gabriel stepped closer, slowly, carefully. "I love you," he said again, this time with nothing held back. Naomi folded the letter, placed it on the table, and looked at him. "You're late." "I know, but I waited." And then she kissed him, not like a fairy tale, but like two people who'd finally found home in each other after every wall had fallen. For the first time in years, Gabriel didn't wake up with a calendar screaming at him. He woke up to the sound of Naomi's laugh in the kitchen, to the smell of cinnamon and burnt toast. Lucas was at the table, eating cereal straight from the box, and Naomi was dancing, barefoot, wearing one of Gabriel's button-down shirts, her curls wild and her smile even wilder. It felt like peace. Not the kind money buys, but the kind you earn, with honesty, with healing, with love that doesn't ask you to shrink. "Dad," Lucas said, grinning, "she's better at breakfast than you." Naomi shot him a wink. "He burned the eggs again last night." Gabriel raised his hands in mock surrender. "You love me for my effort, not my skills." "I love you in spite of both," she teased. And there it was, said so naturally now. Love, no longer a wall, just a truth. Back at Heart and Vale, Naomi's new initiative, Roots Forward, a community-based development program, had launched to overwhelming support. She'd built a bridge between corporate power and real people, and the results were undeniable. Black-owned businesses were being funded. Job training centers opened in underserved neighborhoods. Internships were created for kids like her, kids who never thought they belonged in glass buildings. And it was all under her leadership, but not everyone was celebrating. In the shadows of the boardroom, some old voices whispered. Men who felt the ground shifting under their feet. Women who'd learned to survive by staying silent, and resented Naomi for being louder than they dared. "She's becoming the face of this company," one executive muttered. "She's becoming more than him," said another. And in a world ruled by ego and lineage, that was dangerous. The hit came during a live investor Q&A. A reporter stood up, eyes sharp, voice steady. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "recent documents suggest your salary and influence exceed even some senior partners. How do you respond to accusations that your relationship with Mr. Hart created an unfair advantage?" The room went still. Gabriel began to speak, but Naomi raised a hand. Calm, controlled, she stood, took a breath. "I've worked since I was 15, she said. "I've wiped tables, carried trays, studied at night, and fought my way into rooms that weren't built for me. Nothing I have was handed to me. I didn't get here because I loved a powerful man. I got here because I earned it, and I still have to prove myself every day in ways none of you will ever understand. Silence. Then a few scattered claps, and then more. Gabriel watched her, stunned, proud, in love. But he also knew something Naomi didn't. The board had called an emergency meeting behind closed doors. They were afraid, not just of her, but of what she represented. That night, Gabriel sat Naomi down. "You need to be prepared," he said carefully. "They might try to silence you, strip back your power, maybe even push you out." Naomi didn't flinch. "Let them try. This world isn't fair." She smiled. "I've never needed fairness to win. Just a window." Gabriel reached for her hand. "Then I'll be the one holding it open." But deep down, he was scared. Because what Naomi was fighting wasn't just resistance. It was the system itself. The board meeting happened on a Monday. Naomi wasn't invited. But word got to her anyway. Whispered through hallways, slipped into emails, murmured in elevators. They were drafting a motion to restructure public-facing leadership. In other words, move her out. She stood at the edge of the conference room, staring through the glass. She didn't cry. She planned. And when the doors opened, Gabriel stepped out, furious. "They don't deserve you," he said. But Naomi shook her head. "This isn't about deserving. It's about dismantling." The next morning, Naomi called a press conference, not sanctioned by Heart and Veil, not filtered by PR teams, just her, a mic, and the truth. "I wasn't brought in to make things look good," she began. "I was brought in to make them better. But real change makes people uncomfortable, and discomfort is where progress lives." She outlined every initiative, every result, every life changed. She didn't ask for praise, she showed proof. Being a black woman in power doesn't mean I owe silence to protect fragile egos. It means I carry responsibility to speak, to act, and to lead. The footage went viral, again, and this time the support was unstoppable. Public opinion turned sharply. If the board moved against her now, they would be the ones removed. That evening, back in Gabriel's apartment, Naomi stood by the window, watching the city she was changing. He wrapped his arms around her waist. "You saved us," he whispered. She leaned back into him. "No," she said. "I reminded you who we're supposed to be." He turned her around, cupping her face. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known. And you're still learning to let go." He laughed. "Fair." Then his face turned serious. "Marry me." Naomi blinked. "Don't do it because the world is watching," she said. "I'm not. Don't do it because I held your world together. I'm doing it because I want to build the next one with you." And this time, she was the one who kissed him, soft, certain. "Yes," she whispered. Spring arrived slowly, like it didn't want to interrupt anything. The cold gave way to softer skies, and the city began to bloom. Flowers at the corners of sidewalks, laughter echoing from schoolyards, and one boy in a wheelchair racing down a grassy hill, laughing like he'd just won the world. Lucas. He laughed with his whole body, free, light, unafraid. Naomi and Gabriel watched from a blanket nearby. He was leaning back on his elbows. She was barefoot, her head resting on his chest. They said nothing, but their silence said everything. They were a family now, not perfect, not untouched by struggle, but real. The wedding had been quiet, intimate. No media, no press, no spectacle. Just Lucas holding the rings, Naomi in a white dress she'd sewn touches of her mother's fabric into, and Gabriel standing beside her, finally unarmored. He cried during the vows, so did she. It wasn't just about becoming husband and wife, it was about what they had chosen to believe in, healing, second chances, and love that shows up even when it's scared. Back at Heart and Veil, the tides had shifted. The board, once threatened by Naomi, now looked to her for direction. Not because they had been forced to, but because the world had changed around her, and she'd shown them how to keep up. Roots Forward had expanded nationally. Partnerships were blooming in communities once ignored. And then one morning, Gabriel called a press conference. Naomi wasn't invited. She was already in a meeting when her phone started buzzing. Her name was trending. Confused, she clicked the link and gasped. On the building that once made her feel small, across the massive glass facade, workers were lifting the new gold lettering into place. Harton Brooks Foundation. She stood frozen in the hallway. Gabriel appeared moments later, slightly breathless, holding their son's hand. "You built it with me," he said. "Now your name belongs on it." Naomi blinked back tears. "You didn't ask." "I didn't have to. You've already earned it." She looked down at Lucas, who just smiled. "Told you he'd figure it out eventually." Months passed. Naomi became more than a symbol. She became a movement. She spoke on stages, met with senators, mentored young women who had no idea someone who looked like them could lead at the top. But she never changed the way she walked into a room. Head high, voice clear, and always with her heart in the front pocket of her words. Sometimes she still thought about that night. The rain, the boy on the sidewalk, the bowl of soup, how something so small had become everything. One evening, after Lucas fell asleep watching his favorite space documentary, Naomi and Gabriel sat on the balcony. The city lights blinked like stars trying to speak. Gabriel turned to her. "You ever think, if you'd walked past him that night, we wouldn't be here?" Naomi sipped her tea. "I think about it all the time." He nodded slowly. "Makes me wonder how many lives don't change because we walk past instead of stopping." She looked at him. This man who had once been all walls and edges. Now he was soft in the right places, fierce in the rest. "You didn't just stop," she said. "You stayed." He reached for her hand. "Because you made it worth staying." And then, as the wind danced gently across their skin, Naomi whispered, "We're not done yet." He smiled. "Not even close." The next morning, she returned to the same diner, same corner booth, same humming lights, same smell of coffee and fried eggs. The waitress was new, young, nervous. "Hi, welcome. Would you like a menu?" Naomi smiled. "No need. I know this place." She watched the girl take orders, wipe counters, refill cups with tired hands and a hopeful smile. When the check came, Naomi left something behind. Not just a tip, but a card. On the back, it read, "When you're ready to change your life, call me." She stepped outside, pulled up her coat collar, and looked across the street. The spot where it all began. Lucas, rain, a bowl of soup, and a choice. Kindness, always. The end. Now I ask you, have you ever made a small decision that ended up changing everything? Tell me in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else. Thanks for watching.